have made has brought us into the form and the physical appearance by which we show up in, or the body of our affairs, our relationships, our careers, our education, our experiences on the street, whatever that may be. These were choices that we made, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes we consciously made them, sometimes we made them under the influence of people, places, and things, and some of those were not really of our greatest and highest and best interest. Some of those things that have influenced us, we call them negative. We call them use and abuse. We call them, some people have called them evil. Some of them have called them Satan, or whatever you may want to call it. But the reality of it is that there is only God, and everything works by the means and the method of a spiritual law. The universe has been created out of a spiritual law. The way in which we use the law will determine how our condition and our form is going to show up. And so when I look at some of the conditions and some of the forms that I am experiencing or that I am living with, I realize that someplace along the way in my journey, I made some opening in a door or a window or a vent someplace that said, I'm going to allow that experience to come into my life. And for a while, I thought it was going to serve me, and I thought it was really good because, whoa, at the time it felt really good, but didn't turn out to be so. Because later on, I began to realize that what it was doing was creating barriers, creating limitations, creating lack that brought me into this running into a brick wall. And then I asked myself, how did I get here? I didn't ask for that brick wall to show up in my face this morning. But along the way, somewhere, somehow, I opened up to allow that experience to come in. The message in today's reading of 365 days is about confidence. It's about the conviction. It's about the self-assurance of knowing who you are. Because if you do not know who you are, if you do not understand that this universe is operating under a spiritual law, then you will misuse it. And it shows up as fear and lack and limitation. Because it is the faith that you have in something that is less than that which is whole, perfect, and complete. Fear. Fear is nothing more and nothing less than the misuse of the law. We are using the law all the time, every moment. That law, that part of us that is spiritual and divine, is with us all the time. You cannot separate yourself from God. You can think you have, you can feel like you have, but you cannot separate yourself from God because God is all there is. How you understand it begins to change the condition and the form in your life. And we have to, because we know it's a mental atmosphere, we have to learn to train, to discipline our mental capacity, our mind. And I'm talking about something more than the brain. It just kind of works through the brain, but it's something greater than the brain. It's that whole aura of who we are. The mental capacity of who we are, because that's how we communicate with the divine. That's how we communicate with the oneness and the wholeness, is through our mind. And if we are not developing and disciplining and training our mind, then we will wander around aimlessly, waiting for life to happen. Do you have that bumper sticker on the back of your car? Shift happens. Life happens. It is going on because of the individual thought and the collective thought. And there's a whole lot of activity that is happening in the world, not because I, Michael, decided that it was going to happen, but because a collective thought of people have come together in some way and said, something's going to happen. And some of us walk through life and say, well, just let it happen. And then the 2x4 slaps us upside the head and we say, well, why did that happen to me? Because you allowed yourself to just wander aimlessly. Think about it. If you just walk out in the middle of the freeway, chances are you're going to get smacked by a Mack truck or something of that form. You cannot just wander around aimlessly in life and think that everything is going to play out for the highest and greatest good if, in fact, you do not understand how you are using the law. You need to understand how you are using the law. It takes training. It takes practice. Some years ago when I was studying recreation and leisure studies because I wanted to work on the playground. Yeah. I got paid for going out to the playground and playing. So one of my roles was to show up, as a clown. And so I thought, well, most clowns, you have to have some kind of a gimmick. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I learned how to juggle? Now, some time ago, I brought in some tennis balls, and I was doing a little bit of juggling, but I haven't practiced lately, so I decided to leave them at home because I didn't want to be embarrassed. But in the process, in order to learn that, there had to be some training, there had to be some discipline that went on, and most of it was mental. And then some of it was physical. And so you begin with the easy things. So I would get one ball, and I would practice throwing it up and catching it, and throwing it up and catching it, throwing it up and catching it. Because one of the things that you have to learn when you're learning how to juggle is where you're going to place the ball. Because if you just aimlessly throw it here and there, it's going to be bouncing all over the place. You have to learn to throw it up directly where you want it, so that when it comes back down, that's where your hand is, that you're connecting that. And then when you get really good at that, and you're able to keep that in one place, and then pretty soon you can move over. And then you start catching it with the other hand. So now you've learned this, you've trained yourself, and now you become a little bit more ambidextrous, so you have, two hands with it. And then you pick up another one, and then you start doing the two of them together. And then when you get really good at it, really brave, and you think you've really learned something, you start tossing them back and forth. But you have to make sure that you know where they're going. You have to focus on a place right there, so that each time you know where it's going. And then when you get good at that, when you've mastered something, when you have the confidence and that self-assurance that you're doing this, then you grab a third one. Now it gets really hairy. You're trying to get all this going. Oh, sorry. But it takes training. It takes practice. And then if you get really good and you're really experienced about it, you get 4 bottles and you put them out there, and then you put this chair on there, and then you step onto this chair. And then you start juggling, all while, balancing in the chair. There it goes again. It takes training. Life is the same way. It takes training. Now, when you start out and you're doing juggling, and you pick 3 items, 3 tennis balls, and they're all the same size and the same shape, and you've got one little point right there that you're juggling them. And then all of a sudden you have somebody throw in a bowling ball. Yeah, it gets a little bit difficult because now you're doing with some